Welcome back. Today we're going to work with parameters and calculated fields. We're going to do a pretty simple example here to just get you started with them. Again, this is all based on AWS QuickSight. They have great documentation, especially when trying to figure out some of the formatting of calculated fields. So I highly suggest you check out their website. Let's get started in Dashboard Author. I had put our report in favorites, so it's right there for me to choose. Minimize my panel on the left, and let's pick up where we left off. So now what we want to do is our report is in net fiscal, which again in the Vega platform is your amortized spend. What if I wanted to let the users of this report choose between net fiscal and net cash so they could toggle back and forth? Well, the place to do that would be up here in a drop down. So how am I going to do that? I don't have a field or a column over here that will let me choose between net fiscal and net cash. So we're going to use what's called a parameter. And that is this icon up here. We're going to click on it. We're going to add a new parameter. Your parameter can't have a space or an underscore or anything in it, the parameter name that is. So I'm going to call this spend type. It's a string because we're going to put in the words net fiscal or net cash. But if I could use a parameter for integers, numbers, dates, it's a single value. And what I mean by that is when spend type is set, when this parameter is set, it can only have one value. It can't be net fiscal and net cash. It's going to be either or. So I want it to be a single value. The default value, I'm going to go ahead and make that net fiscal just because the platform defaults to net fiscal on most screens. We could set a dynamic default, but we don't need that today. And there are some advanced settings that we don't need for this parameter either. Whoops, sorry. So we're going to go ahead and hit create. And now I've created, you can see over here, spend type. Now it's asking me, what am I going to do with this parameter? I could use it as just a filter. That hidden filter, as I mentioned in the last value, it can be a filter at the top of the screen, which we want it. We could use it in a calculated field. And there's some custom actions we could do with it that I'll show in a later video where you can use parameters to pass variables to a report. So for example, if I'm in one report and I want to click on a field and go to a different drill down report, I can pass all the information over. And I'm going to demonstrate that in a later video. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, now to be able to add this to our controls at the top, we're going to click on the three dots, add control. I'll call this spend type. That'll be the description that shows up. And I'm going to make it a list. So it's going to be, I'm going to make it a drop down where they can choose what should be selected. And I could link this to a data set, but in this case, since we just have two values, I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. I want my list to show net cash and net fiscal. And I'm going to add it. So now you can see at the top, I have spend type as a drop down. It defaults to net fiscal because when I created it, I wanted it to default to net fiscal, but the user can select back and forth. And apparently I need to go edit something because it's letting me select all. So let's edit this. And I forgot to check this box at the bottom, which was hide the select all. Again, we can't do net cash and net fiscal. We just want one of them. So now when I go back, I should be able to toggle back and forth between net cash and net fiscal. But as you notice, my numbers aren't changing because in the report, I'm still displaying net fiscal. So now we're going to get into calculated fields. Instead of having net fiscal here, what I need is a field that will change depending on whether or not the user of the report selects net cash or net fiscal. So if you've noticed here in our data set, we have a button where we can create a calculated field. So we're going to do that. You can create a name, and this does allow underscores and spaces, unlike the parameter name. So I'm going to call this, let's just call it spend amount, very generic. And this is where you write your calculation in this box here. And on the right-hand side, it gives you things you can choose from. For example, if you need help remembering all the fields, they're listed here for you. Any parameters you've created are listed here. And then most importantly, all of the functions that QuickSight provides. And I'm going to do an if statement. So I'm going to start this off by typing if. There's if else. And if you click on any of these functions, down here at the bottom, they will give you a brief description of what that is and then some quick syntax. What's great is I have this learn more button here. And if you click on it, it will take you to the AWS documentation for that expression that then gives you much better examples than what they have within just QuickSight. And again, this is that documentation I was talking about, Amazon QuickSight user guide that has just about everything you'd ever want to know about QuickSight. So I know now this is how my if else calculation should be formatted. So back within the platform, unlike Excel, where you start off a function with an equal sign, in QuickSight, you just start typing what you want to do. So in this case, I want to do an if else, and it's really nice bringing up this helper function for me here, creates the parameters or creates the parentheses. And what I want to do is if spend type, again, nice helper here. And if you select it, it adds the $ and the parentheses for you. You don't have to do it. But let's say if spend type, equals the string fiscal, then I want this calculated field here, spend amount, to be equal to my net fiscal field from our data. And if it's not, I want it to be equal to my net cash. And of course, you could have turned this around. Instead of it's equal to net cash, make it net cash. If not, make it net fiscal. Either way will work. So now off of our parameter that the customer sets, your user sets, your field spend amount can change between net fiscal and net cash. I will save this, and if you have any errors, it will pop up and tell you. So if it saves, your syntax is correct. And in our fields over here on the left, I now have my spend amount, and calculated fields have this equal sign in front of it. And if you need to go edit it again, you can hit edit calculation. Now, I'm going to make a mistake in here just to show you what an error looks like. This is an if-else statement. I'm going to leave the else out and hit save. You can see it says error found. That's not very helpful. But if you hover over the error, over the calculated field, it will show you what is incorrect. And it has shown me that my syntax is incorrect. So if I go back and then add net cash back in and save, everything will work. Okay, so now I have a field that will change depending on the user's input. So I no longer want net fiscal in here. I want to change this to be spend amount. Now I could drag and drop this over here and then delete net fiscal, but a neat feature that makes this a little easier is if you click on the three dots and hit replace, this will bring up your field list. And I can scroll down to spend amount. And there we go. It has replaced it for me. Unfortunately, it doesn't keep the formatting. So I do have to go back in, make it a currency, go back in, make sure I have my 2 decimal places. I do. Okay. So now to prove this is working, I'm going to do a drop down. Let's look at some of these. $22, $864, $4,400. Do the drop down. Net fiscal should change for me. We can see that the dollars have changed by a little bit. Again, this is amortized versus non-amortized. So now I'm able to switch my providers. I could pick a specific service. Let's go with Elastic. Something to remember is these product names come from the CSPs directly. So even though you and I may call Elastic Compute Cloud EC2, that's not the way it comes across on your bill and in the billing details. So it's spelt out for you. S3, same thing. So I'm going to look at just EC2 spend, and let's start with net fiscal. 3 million. We have our drill down. We can see the applications and the environments where this spend is happening. Let's test that net fiscal net cash again. So we have 3,016. Going to change it to net cash. $2.3. Remove the amortization. So that's working. Now, I want to do one more thing, and that is my report says product spend by month, but unless I look up here, I don't know whether I'm looking at net cash or net fiscal. As I said, parameters can be used many places. So let's take advantage of that parameter and let our user know in the report what type of spend they're looking at. Under properties, which opens automatically quite a bit, so you don't usually have to go open it, but if you did, it's this button right here. I'm going to go to my display and edit my title. And as you can see, we had this text box where we could input text, but now we also have a parameters box that lets us add a parameter. So I'm going to say product spend by month. And what I want to do is in parentheses, Doesn't have to be in parentheses, just the way I'm doing it. I'm going to put that parameter. And now when I save it and go back to my report, I now have product spend by month net cash. And if I were to change it to net fiscal, kind of a pain. You have to keep maximizing that view, but it's the way it is. It is now changed to net fiscal. Again, parameters, calculated fields can be very, very handy. And that's not the limit of where parameters can be used. You may recall that earlier we had, when this was the net fiscal field, we had made this a nicer name, calling it net fiscal. What we're going to do now is we are going to have the title of that value, the title of this, be a parameter. I'm going to insert this parameter name. So now we have spend type. So now it will display net cash versus net fiscal. Again, the main place you see that is when you are going to do a sort on a product, or I'm sorry, do a sort. You get to select between the fields. And now we know that I can sort it by net fiscal, or if we had moved to net cash, and now I can see that it's net cash. Again, parameters can be used in many places. Okay, I think that's it for this video. Next time, we're going to get to a request that we get from many, many customers, and that is what I really want to see is month over month growth. So right now, I'm showing the spend by all the products and drill down to application and environment. But what if I want to see how much it's grown from January to February or February to March? You would think that'd be a calculated field, and you can do it with a calculated field, but I'm going to show you an easier way. See you next time. Thanks.